Hi, Honors Chem students. This video is about how to write your data analysis without actually collecting the data. As you know, we're not doing the experiment. You're welcome to carry out the experiment if you'd like, but this is a research proposal and we are not actually collecting data. So how do we do that? It seems kind of counterintuitive. How can you write a data analysis if you have no data? So on your research proposal template, here is part 7, the data analysis. And in here, we need to present a plan for collecting the data. We need to record the data and have a plan for how to analyze the data. And if we look back at the data nugget, here's our data nugget that we did in class and the experiment where they measured pockets of liquid, and here's the data they collected. For each day, they took the average mass of the containers plus the water, and they did this for the control, the sodium chloride, and the magnesium sulfate. So we want to do this for our experiment. And again, I'm going to go back to my example. So here's my example again of how the amount of baking powder affects the height of cupcakes. And you recall that in the previous video, when I wrote my instructions, before I wrote them, I went back and looked at my question. And in particular, I looked at what I was going to measure. So I was going to measure the height, okay? And I wrote down some stuff, right? I wrote down that I need to record my data in the table, and I'm going to measure the height. And I'm going to do that in centimeters with a ruler before and after for 5 cupcakes for each amount of baking powder. So I'm going to have to set up this fake, okay, sample data table. So first I'm going to make a plan for my data collection. So I've written my plan here and basically what I'm going to record, how many times I'm going to record it, how I'm going to record it. So that's my brief plan for data collection. After that, I need to record my heights. So to make my sample data, I will open up a spreadsheet, a Google Sheet, and I can call this my sample cupcake data. So now I've set up some columns and labels for my rows here with the trials in one column, the number of the different cupcakes and the height before and after. And then this column here is going to be the height that the cupcake rose. So I'll first start off by putting in some sample data. I'll say that my cupcake before baking is around 2.5 centimeters. And this is sample data, so you can pick any numbers that seem reasonable. I'll give a little bit of variation by giving numbers slightly different from 2.5. And then after baking, since there's no baking powder, this is my control. I'm going to assume that it does not rise very high. And again, you can put some variation in here to make it a little more interesting. And then now, so this is my data right here. This is data that I collect, right? Sample data that I collected. And now here, this height that the cupcake rose is part of my data analysis. I'm going to subtract my heights before and after to get the height that the cupcake rose. Now in Google Sheets, you can enter in a formula by putting in equals, and then I can put in the cells that I'm going to subtract. So after the C2 minus B2, which is my before, and press return, and it calculates what that is for me. And I can also, if I click on this cell and then drag down this little square, I can drag it down and it will copy that formula down for me. So now I want to calculate the average of the height that this rose. So again, here I can put in a little formula. I can say equals, and I can use an average function. So that's average. And I can drag over the cells that I want to average, close parentheses, return, and it gives me an average height that the cupcake rose. So now I want to copy this table and use it again for my next baking powder amount. So I'm going to select the cells, Control C to copy, and then go down here, Control V to paste that. And I'm going to change this to a 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder now. And then I can enter in new data for the 1/4 teaspoon baking powder. So now I adjusted the data here. I made these a little higher for the 1/2 teaspoon. And then you can see that these heights automatically adjust because the formulas had been copied over too. And then I copied and pasted that table again and put in new heights for 1 teaspoon of baking powder. Now I'm going to think about a way to graphically see the relationship between the amount of baking powder that's changed with the height that the cupcakes rose. So to see the relationship between the amount of baking powder and the height of the cupcakes, I put the amounts here and the average heights over here on the side. And I want to graph this by making a chart. Now, the easiest way to do this is to select your data and then use this little Explore button on the lower right. Click on Explore, and it will give you a choice of different charts that you could use. I kind of like this bar graph here, so I'm going to click on that and then drag it over, and it will appear in your spreadsheet. So now I want to take my tables and my graphs and copy them into my paper. So to copy a table, you just select the cells, the table that you want, Control C, go to your paper and paste that in, Control V. I would put a link to the spreadsheet so you can go right to the spreadsheet later. So if you click on this table now, this little linked spreadsheet will appear, and you can click on that to go directly to your spreadsheet. So now I have all my sample data in my paper, but I also want the graph. So I go back to my spreadsheet. I click on the graph, Control C, Control V, paste, and my graph is now in my paper as well. So this is just one way to analyze this data, and depending on what your problem is, what your data looks like, you may choose a different way to analyze your data. So here are the key parts of a data analysis. First of all, make a data collection plan. Make sure that you know how many trials you're going to run, what your control is, how many data points you want to collect to make a graph later or a chart or table, and think about what units your data is going to be in. Then create sample data on a spreadsheet. Number 3, figure out the best way to display what the sample data shows. Then 4, use tables, charts, and graphs to analyze your sample data. And to show a trend, graphs or charts should have at least 4 data points. Hope this video was helpful, and hopefully now you know how to write a data analysis without actually collecting data.